Welcome to Steve Savant's Money, the name of the game. Hi everyone, I'm your host Steve Savant, syndicated financial columnist and money gamer extraordinaire. Today we're talking about getting a second opinion on your policy portfolio with nationally recognized expert Barry Flagg. Hey, welcome to the show, Barry.
Thanks, Steve. Glad to be here.
Barry, I'm telling you, I'm just trying to be the normal consumer here. When I look at, I have homeowners policy, I have my auto policy, I have my PUP policy, my umbrella policy, I have a disability policy, I have a long-term care policy, and I also have a life insurance policy. I don't know what I'm spending. I'm just at the behest. I'm really at the mercy of the advisor or the producer or agent who sold it to me, and he's probably a great guy, a good person. She might be a fantastic moral person, but I don't know what I'm paying. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of consumers say, hey, is it a good deal compared to the rest of the industry? Mm-hmm. Is it close? Am I really getting the best I can do? When I'm looking at this, I need a second opinion. Mm-hmm. I want a policy review. Mm-hmm. I'm looking at this. Tell me why it's important for a policy owner to know what they're paying for a contract.
Well, you mentioned a number of different types of coverage where the premium is equal to the cost. Long-term care, disability, homeowners, umbrella. In all of those cases, what they're paying is what it actually costs. Life insurance has two different basic types of life insurance. One is term insurance, and guaranteed universal life might fall into that category. And the other looks like a combination between insurance and an investment. So for all those types of coverage where the premium is the cost, it's easy to get a comparison. For the products that have a cash value element, there the charges are being deducted from the premium and from the cash value. So it's really important to find an advisor who measures not premium, but what is actually being deducted from your premium and from your cash values.
Okay, so as a consumer, I usually get an annual statement, and I look at that annual statement, and I kind of become blurry-eyed. I'm really not sure of what I'm looking for. When I get my annual statement, what is that basically going to tell me as a consumer?
It tells you what you are being charged, and that's a great place to start. If it was an IRA or an investment account, you could get your annual brokerage statement or your annual IRA statement and then go to Yahoo Finance or some other website and say, okay, what kind of fees am I being charged relative to the peer group? What kind of performance am I getting relative to the peer group? Prior to 2002, that capability did not exist for life insurance. That now exists. So starting with the annual statement, but then asking your financial advisor, how does that relate to everything else that's out there that's suitable for me? That's the next question they need to be asking.
Now, I've seen that this is kind of a nice thing for consumers. It's called an in-force ledger. An in-force ledger seems to be the actual prior performance of that year or how many years you've had it. Talk a little bit about that and introduce us to this, because I think people would say if they knew they could have access to this free from the carrier, they would order it.
Everybody should get an in-force illustration, maybe not every year, depending on product type. Other product types, every year. But as you say, it's free to get from the carrier. It shows the impact of cumulative performance. It doesn't actually show past performance, but it shows the impact of cumulative performance, where you are right now, and it does a projection of what could happen going forward. So it's really, again, really important to have a financial advisor who understands that what could happen going forward is a function of two things: what's actually being charged inside that policy, and what the actual, or what the performance that is reasonable to expect. So you want an advisor that will measure those two things in an in-force illustration.
Okay, so if I have my annual statement, I have my in-force policy, and then I usually have the original proposal that I was given by my advisor. Can I look at my original proposal and compare it to my in-force ledger to see what's happened? Oh, this is what I was sold. This is what I actually received.
Not only could you should, because you go back far enough in time, life insurance products were designed by actuaries, highly regulated. What actually happened was very consistent with what was expected to happen. With the advent of products like universal life in the 1980s, things changed. Flexibility was introduced, which was good, but what also happened is the premiums were not regulated by the departments of insurance or by the actuaries anymore, and so sometimes policies are underfunded. Too often, policies have been underfunded. So it's very important to get that original illustration to see what was supposed to happen, and then the in-force illustration to see where am I now on my track, because the policyholder is at risk for being off track.
So if we have our original proposal, if we have our in-force ledger that we ordered absolutely free from the carrier, and we have our annual statement, that should get us in the game and give us an idea of what we're paying and is this a really good deal compared to all the rest of the industry. We'll be right back after the break with more with Barry Flag.
Take a close look at your hard-earned dollar. How do you think your money's doing? Are you keeping an eye on it? Is it protected from taxes, inflation, and market risk? Over time, those Washingtons could become Franklins. With tax-advantaged indexed universal life, from one of the largest distributors of indexed universal life, Ash Brokerage.
Well, welcome back to our second segment. We're with Barry Flagg. We're walking through the due diligence, or kind of the do care. Do I care about what I have? Yes, I do. So I need to do a little bit of making sure that I'm getting. Now, we talked at just at the very at the end of the break. I said annual statement, your in-force ledger, and your original proposal. That's a good place to start. I don't want to say that is the end game. We're going to that now. Mm-hmm. So what we've done is we've got you in the game. Those are all reports that you should have as a consumer, so you have it in your file. What do I need to do for the next step?
Well, so the in-force ledger, the annual statement, and the as-issued illustration tells you where you were supposed to be and where you are. What it doesn't tell you is where you could or should be. Where you could or should be is you're on a path right now. And so are you on the right product path, or is there a product that can deliver lower expenses and better performance? It's the same conversation you'd have if you were talking about an investment, which is what insurance has become more and more like.
I've noticed that there's standards out there that you have adopted. I mean, they're out there, the legislation, they're regulatory, that really help to protect consumers and give us an understanding of what's a good idea for us. And there's these best practices by our advisors or your agent who sold this to you. Those are things that really we need to kind of know as consumers to make sure that we're actually doing the right thing. Talk a little bit about those standards. Are they pretty hard to understand?
No, not at all. In fact, the reason I said in the first segment that if this was a 401k or a brokerage account, you'd be able to look at your expenses on your statement and compare it to the universe of alternatives in the marketplace. And that's commonplace. The reason why that's commonplace is because these standards have been adopted by the investment business for the past 3 or 4 decades. Well, good news, those standards were applied to life insurance last April at a convening of industry leaders at West Point, and those standards are now available for the insurance business. So insurance advisors who genuinely put the client's interest first have the same framework, the same checklist, the same process that they can apply to life insurance for their clients that they've had in the investment business for a long time.
Barry, I want you to go through some basic premise. You invented a software program called Veralytics. That program measures some of the things we're talking about. But I want you to make sure that we understand as consumers, why is it important to know expenses are on one side and the performance of my policies on the other side? And I really want to weigh them separately.
Well, so expenses are a real number. Expenses is what the insurance company has said in writing they're going to charge the customer. And it's hard to change those. As we've talked about, you got to go to departments of insurance across 50 states and whatever. And so it's not easy to, so those are actual numbers that can be relied upon. The performance number is a guesstimate, a guess, maybe a good guess, maybe not a good guess. Once you commingle actual cost representations with a hypothetical performance assumption, both of them become hypothetical, and you can't discern good costs from bad costs or good performance from bad performance. So you have to separate the two, and this is part of the best practice standards, and it's what's been done in the investment business for 3-4 decades. You have to separate the two. Measure expenses. What am I actually being charged inside this policy? How does that compare? Is it a fair price? Am I being overcharged? And what is my performance expectation, and is that reasonable?
Now, on your expense side, we're comparing that to the industry at large.
Correct.
So we're going to find out, are we in the top quartile or are we at the bottom? We're going to find out if we're getting a good deal.
Correct.
Because the performances could happen, not happen. It's futuristic.
Correct.
But the expense lows, I need to know, kind of quantify, hey, am I paying too much? How do I know? Against all the companies that play in the United States in this area in life insurance.
Correct.
So why is that so important for us to know what everybody else is doing? How does that I know it helps us to understand our expense loads, but ultimately, do people change? Do carriers become better, or they lose market share? How does that work?
Absolutely. There is an 80% swing between best available rates and terms or good pricing and worst available rates and terms and bad pricing. So if there's such a wide swing, if you don't know what you're being charged and how it relates to the universe, you don't know if you're in the good half or the bad half. You can't tell what you're paying. So you could be paying almost twice as much as what you might otherwise be paying if you examine cost and performance separately.
Well, that's our show for today. I want to thank Barry Flack for being my special guest in today's Money Mentor. And before moving forward with any of the ideas on our show, always consult your tax advisor and your legal counsel. And remember, as the good Reverend John Wesley once said, make all you can, save all you can, give all you can. I'm Steve Savant. I'll see you next week.